Hello and welcome. I'm Devin.
And I'm Darren.
And this is 10 Minute Tabletop, where we cover the 3 biggest stories in tabletop from the past week in 10 minutes or less so you can get back to creating characters, stacking dice, and playing the game. Some big news this week. I'd love to start with the news about Koboa. This sounds awesome. It's a new game being announced. Mm-hmm. It's South American stories, but it's going to be published on the 5e system.
And?
It's going to be published on Pathfinder.
And
Black Flag, a.k.a. Tales of Valiant.
Yeah, that's huge. It's getting a big rollout, which is not usually done like cross-functionally. Right.
Yeah, I sometimes see like, hey, it's going to be 5e and maybe down the road it's going to be Pathfinder. I sometimes see 5e and Pathfinder, but the fact that they're trying to be compatible with all 3 systems is incredibly ambitious.
Yeah, it gives me a lot of confidence in the actual content itself, and I'm also just super excited. I'm a big fan of mythology from all different cultures, and I feel like especially the the ancient American and indigenous cultures kind of get overlooked a lot. So I'm excited about this.
Yeah, Coyote and Crow had huge success. That shows that there's an appetite for these stories that aren't just traditionally kind of Anglo-Saxon, Western mythologies and folktales. So it's cool that we're seeing more of those. Yeah. Right, and it's cool that they're trying to make it as available as possible across all of these platforms.
Yeah, it's going to be in 3 different languages, right? Portuguese, English, Spanish.
Oh my gosh! So launching with multiple languages, launching with multiple systems.
Yeah.
Also, the launch trailer looked amazing.
Yes, I watched that as well. It looked very cool. Got me excited. So
I want to know. I'm going to be following this a lot, but this seems like one of the more ambitious campaign setting games coming out recently, because it is coming out in 3 systems. It is coming out with 3 languages. You don't really see a lot of language translation from a first launch.
And I'm excited because I like this push to have a little more diversity in the RPG space, because I feel like sometimes a lot of these things, even things like stand-up comedy, can be inherently Western in their base. And so, part of RPG and tabletop RPG is a collaboration of storytelling, and the best form of that comes from multiple perspectives. So I'm very, very excited about that.
Let's see here. What you got? Innovative new form system, simple, intuitive system that can produce over 1,400 unique species or races.
Okay.
2 all new classes, including the Bruja. I think that's how you pronounce it. Then we have the 12 subclasses. Too many creature stat blocks to count, and unlimited lore. This looks like it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can't wait to get in the sandbox.
But does this mean we're going to see more people trying to launch on all 3 platforms? That says a lot for Tales of Valiant, aka Black Flag, if people are launching their new games on them as well. Or is it that the OGLs cause this fissure that you have to launch on 3 platforms to be successful?
Yeah, to kind of diversify your portfolio.
I know, right? So I'm excited to see what happens with here. But talking about translations and things like that, D&D, Back to the Dragon game, our second story, is releasing a new box set, a new kind of starter set in Japan, and they've redone the art.
To kind of be a little bit more relevant within their own market. They have their own Japanese starter set that they're releasing in the more manga style art. They did not an art change for Italy, but they did their own special Italian rollout, and I'm just glad to see some attention paid to, again, things that might usually get overlooked, and that is the Eastern style of art, because as you said earlier, a lot of this art and lore can be inherently Anglo-Saxon, and so I'm glad to see them diversifying a little bit.
I believe it's Chomaran, who is a manga artist that did the actual art, so it's kind of like this, they're using a very established look and feel from an artist, which I really like, that the artist is kind of credited in a lot of the press.
Yeah.
Which I think is buying them a little bit of credibility, but it's also cool that they're putting their name so far out there.
Yeah. Actually giving credit where credit's due, and someone that actually has some skin in the game instead of just kind of maybe pandering to topically what they think they would like.
It's mangaka Chomaron is the full name there. But yeah, so this is here's the thing. We're seeing Dungeons and Dragons really trying to do a cultural push into D&D. Right now, all the books are already translated in Japanese, but it seems like they're trying to change the art style to kind of more favor into that culture. We saw a few months ago they did a commercial, like a Dungeons and Dragons commercial that was in Japan, really high budget, really, really cool. But we're starting to see like, hey, you know, the D&D stories that are told maybe here in the West aren't really the same kind of stories you could tell here because they're not maybe as applicable.
Yeah. And
or relatable.
And I think that's smart to kind of change the way that they're presenting themselves, because it's like, if you look at manga and if you love anime, it's like that's very deep into fantasy and a very rich hunger for like storytelling. So I think it is a good demographic that would be very, very into it if it was, you know, like you said, made relevant and relatable to them.
Yeah. And of course, our last story, when talking about, you know, accessibility and coming to games, Alchemy, which is a VTT, and we were talking about this earlier. Alchemy is not a VTT that's designed really to drive a lot of tactical gameplay.
Yeah, it's a little more, you said scene based, so as opposed to being like battle tactics, it's more based on like your stats and...
It really lies heavily on like theater of the mind as like an additional tool for theater of the mind play. I've seen a lot of it. Waffles and Warlocks has done a lot of really cool stuff. I've seen their shows. And you really kind of set the scene, and it really is a tool for theater of the mind style of play.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting because like I'm not a big fan of just like rolling dice on Discord, you know, like a quick command. When I play theater of the mind virtually, I like kind of a little bit extra, but I don't need battle maps.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm someone who actually, you know, I love me some combat, but I am definitely more of a theater of the mind person. And so if I had a platform that made that aspect of the game a little bit more rich instead of just focusing on the mechanics of an actual battle scene, like, hell yeah, I would love that.
Now, Alchemy's going to Kickstarter. They've been in beta for a pretty long time, and now they're kind of going to Kickstarter, but they've kind of announced that they're partnering up with Pathfinder, which Paizo, that's going to be huge for them. And that's going to be one of the big things that's kind of like pushing into Alchemy's release. They're also partnering with Call of Cthulhu. So these are probably the two biggest games outside of D&D.
Yeah. And this is interesting because it's like another, you know, seemingly big partnership outside of Wizards of the Coast and D&D Beyond, and giving other people options that aren't just like these two things. If you want to have like your easy entry point, for instance, if you want to start playing a tabletop RPG, but you don't necessarily have like Dwarven Forge and all this stuff in a big group, and it's making it a lot easier.
Everyone plays differently, right? And some people love the tactical combat, and you have Foundry, you have Roll20, you have Fantasy Grounds. They're great for that. And then there are all these other tools like Roll, Alchemy that are coming out that are kind of making this really cool experience to tell stories that you don't need like the tactical combat to do so. But you can still kind of create immersion in a different way. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I love that because, you know, I mean, as anyone who's played with multiple tabletop RPG groups, like not every game is the same and not every style is the same. And, you know, maybe I'll need, you know, Roll20 for this, but then this other group wants to be a little more theater of the mind and focus on something different. I will use, you know, Alchemy for that. I love this. I love the different options that are popping up. Thank you, creative and, you know, industrious people. You're making life so much easier.
So I'm excited for Alchemy's Kickstarter release. Over 3,000 people have already kind of signed up to participate in the Kickstarter. So let's see if this, you know, kind of partnership pushes them over the way.
Yes.
Hey, and that's our news. That's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this and you want to support the show, head over to patreon.com/Total Party Chill. And with that, we'll see you next week.